I just want to pick up and say a bit more about this relationship I've been kicking around between the role of the senses in the construction of consciousness and how alternative modes of consciousness, for want of a better expression, might be induced or controlled or something like that. Yeah, I think one of the responses I got, which I thought was really great, was to do with a term I'd never come across before, acousmatic, or acousmatic sound, acousmatic music, which, if I understand it correctly, means an approach to music making or approach to the appreciation of sound and music, which deliberately detaches it from its source. You know, because usually when we, actually I'm saying usually, historically when we've heard sounds, we've usually been in the presence of the source. You know, you can see the person playing the guitar while you hear the guitar music. You can kind of see the bird on the branch whilst you hear its tweeting noises and so on. But acousmatics, and I'm not this wrong, is a deliberate separation of that, so that the source of the sound is hidden, which forces you or obliges you to focus purely on the sonic qualities, to kind of experience the sounds purely and for themselves, rather than as having an origin in some visual instrument or a visually realizable object of some kind, like a bird or a guitar or something. And I guess what's happening there is we do have this ability to bind sensory experiences together into single unities, single holistic entities. I think it's probably called something like neuronal binding, but elsewhere I've referred to it as the functioning of the holistic operator, which kind of does that, which takes sensory impressions from the different sensory organs and unifies them into a single experience. I guess this acousmatics is a deliberate attempt to suppress that or to prevent that happening. And I'm just wondering what would be the effect of that, really. I mean, certainly one of the effects, I guess, would be, because the senses are mutually reinforcing, and they tend to be mutually reinforcing. So when I can see the origin of a sound and I can hear that sound, the directionality of that sound becomes very significant. In fact, if I'm watching television or watching a video on YouTube, and I can see the person speaking, for example, the sound seems to be coming from the person's mouth on the screen, even though it clearly isn't. It's coming from the speakers. So there's a binding going on there, which is actually contrary to the logic and the truth of the situation, but it's a very compelling effect. So an approach which focuses purely on the sound and which suppresses visuality would also suppress that directionality of the sound, suppress the attribution of a particular origin, which in some cases, as I suggested with this screen example, is wrong anyway. You know, sounds don't come out of screens, they come out of speakers. And so if you're suppressing or just kind of denying yourself the possibility of attributing an origin to the sound, I guess it would force you to kind of inhabit the sound to a certain extent. You know, so that the sound is composes your consciousness in a way that's more interesting and more enveloping than it acting as a vector that ends in your consciousness. Because certainly, if I'm watching somebody on a YouTube screen, let's say, or I'm watching a TV show and somebody's speaking direct to camera, I attribute the sound coming out of their mouth, but I kind of attribute it as kind of terminating in my consciousness. It's almost as if the sound, I don't know, it sounds obvious when I say it, it's as if the sound is travelling through space and my consciousness is at the terminal end of that sound, which of course in a way it is, but in another way it isn't. My consciousness is the whole situation in many ways. You know, I'm also conscious of the screen, I'm conscious of the image on the screen, I'm conscious of the room that the screen is in. So that identification of myself, my consciousness, as being at the end point of a directional vectorial sound coming from an imaginary pixelated mouth on the screen is not necessarily conducive to an understanding or inhabiting of consciousness which is more enveloping and more distributed over space, if I can refer back to that kind of idea. Yeah, I don't know to what extent, once you've kind of experienced acousmatic sound, and I'm guessing that since most people use headphones these days, I imagine acousmatic sound is very, very prevalent. I don't know to what extent acousmatics would kind of set the tone for these alternative states of consciousness that I've talked about. Maybe they would, maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, I don't know. I'll do some experiments with it, I'll do some playing around with it in my own mind and see if I can get somewhere with that. Anyway, that's it.